Welcome to A Warm Embrace, where we believe in the transformative power of touching lives and embracing communities through the power of captivating stories. Sit back, relax, and immerse yourself in the warmth of the A Warm Embrace podcast.
Good day, Guillermo.
Good morning, John. How are you?
Well, I'm good. How about you? How's New York, by the way?
I'm doing well, thank you. New York was great. It was a much needed time off that Dorota and I needed. And one of the great parts about it was the fact that we also got to visit and work a few hours from our New York office. So it was a little bit of work and play and a change of scenery, a different environment, which was always appreciated.
For today's episode, we'll talk about the power of hugs, embracing connections, and spreading positivity. So I think you are the most qualified person to talk about this so that our audience and I myself can learn about this from you.
Love the whole concept of the warm embrace. I mean, it is my tagline. And I don't necessarily think that I'm the most qualified person to speak about hugs, but I do love a good hug and I do love a warm embrace, which is the tagline of Guillermo.world. And anything that I can go ahead and answer, I'll be more than happy to.
How does the simple act of giving and receiving hugs impact our emotional well-being? And what scientific evidence supports the power of hugs to promote positive emotions?
Hugs unbelievably impact our emotional well-being. I once read a statement by a family therapist and author, Virginia Sater, who mentioned that we all, as human beings, need 4 hugs a day for survival, 8 hugs a day for maintenance, and 12 hugs a day for growth. And that really got me thinking. If we go back to our childhood, how is it that we grow? Of course, we receive nutrition from our parents. We have our basic needs, but if you notice, children always run to their parents for hugs. And that equation or that math that I just stated of the 4, 8, and 12, it shows how children grow so fast because they're receiving such emotional support in the form of a hug and also the security that they're receiving from their parents. And I think that that's beautiful. And we as adults, we don't receive that enough. And it's like I was thinking, it's like I even started thinking about myself. Like, am I in survival or am I in maintenance? And sometimes I find myself the other day it was interesting how particularly that I actually went to my wife and I said, you know what, I need a hug. And instead of just a quick hug, it was one of those prolonged hugs that I feel that could have been worth 8 because it really fed my emotional bucket that I was very much needing.
In a fast-paced digital world where physical connections seem to be diminishing, how can embracing hugs help us bridge the gap and create meaningful connections with others?
The idea is connection. And even though, yes, you can go ahead and create connections via technology, the truth of the matter is that we as human beings need human connection and we need human touch. And I think that the idea behind all of that is that we need to get back a little bit to move away from the screen, to move away from the phone, to move away from the computer and go back to the face-to-face interaction, the human interaction, the tactile interaction. And in my opinion, if that's not possible, then one of the things that I learned at a recent yoga class is that if you go ahead and put your hands over your chest and you give it a little bit of a pressure, I realized that it feels like a hug. So if circumstances dictate that you need to be isolated or you as a human being feel more comfortable being isolated, then highly suggest that you try to go ahead and give yourself a hug. And that is by pressing your hand over your chest and actually pressing down and doing pressure. Or give yourself the great bear hug. I mean, I do it all the time and I do it to myself. But the idea of being able to transfer that connection, to transfer that emotion, to transfer that love is something that I highly believe. But in the absence of that, we can go ahead and give ourselves love in the form of love and self-love.
Thank you for that tips, Guillermo.
You're welcome.
How can we approach hugging with respect for diverse perspectives while still spreading the message of the positive impact it can have on our lives?
First and foremost, you said it in the question, it's respect. And with respect comes permission. And so I've always been one to know that my boundaries end where somebody else begins. And so that being said, it's like I am a physical person. So I tend to go ahead and approach with a hug. But if a person that I am approaching with a hug stands back or moves back, then I need to go ahead and respect that. It's a form of implicit permission. It's like I don't necessarily go in when I know that the person that's going to be receiving it is going to be uncomfortable. Remember, we need to go ahead and respect each other's boundaries. We need to respect each other's space. We need to we need to respect each other's bodies. And in doing that, we need to be able to know that if I or you say no, no means no. And that's where the whole idea of respect is. And one of the core ideals of a warm embrace is that the embrace need not necessarily be physical. One of the things that I recently did for a friend is I offered her presents. She wrote in a group chat that we're both in, she said, you know what, I'm having a hard day today and I'm just needing my tribe. And it was very interesting because, of course, several of our friends, they started giving her words of encouragement. Some were offering jokes. Some were trying to make her laugh. Others were telling her, you know, you got this. And I love that. And then when it came to me, one of the things that I said to her, I was like, you know what? Our friends beautifully gave you support. And instead of adding to those words, I'm just going to give you my presence. I'm just going to let you know I am here for you. I am holding space for you. And therefore, anything that you need, don't you hesitate to reach out to me. And of course, to reach out to our tribe. And that was something that so many in our group appreciated, because sometimes we feel the need to fill a void with words when all somebody needs is presence. All somebody needs is an ear. You know what, somebody needs is a hug. And any one of those actions is giving space. It's giving permission. It's receiving permission, and it's giving the love that we as human beings are needing to go ahead and transfer from one to the other.
Hugs can be culturally significant and carry different meanings across societies. How can we ensure that hugs are received and given with respect and consent?
That boils down to the intention in which the hug is given. That's one of the things that I've noticed. It's like I love living in Miami. And the reason that I love living in Miami is that Miami is a cultural melting pot. That's also another reason that I love visiting New York. It's another cultural melting pot. I've always described the US, at least some of the major cities, as follows. Miami is the gateway to the US from the South and the Caribbean, from South America, from Central America, and the Caribbean. New York, I feel, is the gateway into the Americas from Europe. And I feel that Los Angeles and Seattle are the gateway into the Americas from Asia. And so based on that, the fact that in the US, we have this ability to see so many different cultures and be able to interact with those cultures, we're able to see how best we can go ahead and approach Latin people are very touchy, if you will. It's funny, I remember a story when I was at the university, was that I had a friend, she was from Venezuela, and of course, in the US or within Latin American communities, you tend to greet with a kiss on the cheek. And it was funny because she had come from Venezuela, and one of our professors also happened to be her major advisor. So the advisor toward her major, we were both studying economics at the time. And so he happened to be from the Midwest. And so it was funny because one of their first interactions, she leaned in for a kiss on the cheek, of course. And of course, he was taken aback because being in a position of power, if you will, as a professor, he just didn't know how to react. And it was at that point that she realized, oh, wow, he doesn't have the same cultural customs that I do. And so it's funny because I also experienced something similar when I moved to the Midwest for 10 years. I coming from Miami, yes, I also have that same practice of leaning in for the kiss on the cheek to go ahead and greet. But what ended up happening is that people were taken aback by it. And but one of the things that I noticed that in the Midwest, they reciprocated with a hug. And so I noticed that it's like, okay, you're still going in with that warmth, and but you're respectful of the culture. And so I think that personally, I think a kiss is a little bit more intimate than a hug, but you're still needing to be respectful of the culture that you are approaching. And so at the end of the day, it goes back to my answer to the previous question. It really is being there, being present. And secondly, it really goes about with the intention that you're going into. And so when I go in for a hug, when I lean in for a kiss, the idea behind all of that is to go ahead and show love, to go ahead and show affection. It's not it's not romantic. It's fraternal. I go in and I look at my fellow man and my fellow woman as a fellow human being on this earth. And as we share our presence on this earth, we're brothers and sisters. And so I always love the whole concept of the big bear hug because that's how I can go ahead and show love. But if I'm unable to, being present and being respectful will always be the top two mantras in any interaction. And if I can go ahead and give that warm embrace, well, that's just icing on the cake. At least as they say here in the US. I don't know if you have that. I don't know if you have that same metaphor in Asia when you say icing on the cake. It's just say that's the bonus.
Here in the Philippines, we rarely kiss a person, especially the opposite sex. Hugs will do here.
Okay, so there you go. And I think I love that because I think that a hug is a universal salutation. It's a universal greeting. It's a universal form of comfort, right? It's like there are Europeans who would take the one kiss and they give you two more. It's like, for example, my wife being Polish, they do three kisses. And I think that was always interesting. It was like, for example, the French, they do two, they want two. But in Poland, they do three. It's always like, okay, well, you needed to warm up. But and at first that was something that was new to me because I was very much used to the one kiss. But I love learning about all the different cultures, and I love hearing about the fact that in the Philippines the hug is more acceptable versus the kiss. And I agree. I think that the hug tends to be more universal. It tends to minimize certain undertones, but at the end of the day, it really is a matter of cultural respect. And if I proceed from the whole concept of being present, that's what I think is always going to be the best. And of course, respect and permission.
Now let's get personal. What is the best hug you received and the best hug you given?
Ooh, the best hug that I've ever received has to come from my wife. And that is just, it has to be the moments where it's like, you know what, it comes from the time that I need to refill my cup. And I don't want to sound too cliche, but I'm one of those people who likes to give. And when I'm giving, I sometimes, because I'm giving, I've always been one to find it a little difficult to receive. I'm working on that. I really am working. But because I give so much of myself, there are just moments where I have felt depleted. And when I feel in those moments of being depleted, I go to her and I say to her, you know what, I need a hug. And my family has also been pivotal in giving me hugs. I remember growing up as a kid, it's like my father would give me those squeezes. And that's why I appreciate like those big bear hugs, because when I go to him, even now, it's funny because my father is shorter than I am. And so he's also older. So when I see him, I give him what I say in English is a big bear hug. He says in Spanish, "Es un abrazo rompe costillas," which is a rib breaking hug. He's like, he goes, "You're breaking my ribs," but it's like because I want to hold him so tight. The same thing with my mother. It's like I go in for those hugs, and I feel that the hugs that I give to family are are the hugs that are my best hugs because they give all of me, right? I think it's because they've known me all my life. They've watched me grow, and I think in terms of the of our parents, I think it goes back to the whole notion of the numbers that I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. That it's four hugs for survival, 8 hugs for maintenance, and 12 hugs for growth. When we go in and hug our parents, we revert back to being children. And I personally, the reason that I go in for those hugs and I cherish them so much is because I know as an adult, they're getting on in age, right? And I want to go ahead and cherish them, And that's not to say that they're going anywhere anytime soon. So don't get me wrong. And I say that with the most respect and the knowledge about that. I want to go ahead and cherish every moment that I have with them, right? And that's the whole notion of also receiving them. So I think it's a combination. The best hugs that I've ever received have been, of course, from my wife and from my parents. But the best hugs that I've also given have been to my wife and to my parents because it's just there's a level, not only a certain level of comfort that only family can give, but there is a level of home, and that's a word that I've always loved. It's home, and how can we give a sense of home to somebody? And you do it by means of a hug, but there has to be something else there. And I think that's where that familial relation goes ahead and plays a.
For the last question, Guillermo,
Okay.
as a podcaster who promotes positivity, what personal experience or stories have you encountered or heard from others that highlights the transformative power of hugs in uplifting spirits and fostering a sense of belonging?
Oh, you know what? That's actually a really good one. I love that question because I've heard that. I've heard so many times in so many different circumstances. They come to me and then they say, "Guillermo, I love your hugs." It's like, or "Guillermo, you give the best hugs." And it's a little sad, if you will, when I think about it, because it goes back to those numbers and goes back to those numbers. It could be a person who's solitary and doesn't have that human connection, that human touch as readily available to them. And then when I come in and I'm giving them a loving hug, it fills their cup. And at first it may seem sad. I'm also joyful and I'm grateful that I can go ahead and give that. And that's why the message, when I chose the whole notion of a warm embrace, it was truly to be able to offer that comfort. And what is it that a hug really does? I mean, we've discussed the power of hugs in terms of survival, maintenance, and growth. We've discussed the power of hugs in terms of cultural greetings or cultural comfort. But if we really think about it, it's a hug gives comfort to those that need it, and it gives comfort to those that give it. And that's really the whole concept and the basis of what a warm embrace started from and what I wanted to do. And even as I go into this podcast, and even as I go into relaying my messages on social media, relaying my messages on stage, it really is that idea. How can I always keep that mantra in the back of my mind. How can my words serve as a hug? How can my words be comforting to those that hear it? And anything that I can go ahead and do. And I tend to have this visual imagination. It's like sometimes when I'm thinking, it's like my words, I see them flowing out of my mouth and enveloping my audience. And even as I'm speaking to you now, I'm imagining that. I'm imagining my words being able to provide comfort, to provide love, to provide a warm embrace to my listener. And so I do that. I do that, and of course I send a virtual hug. I don't know if you've ever seen that little GIF or that meme where it says sending you a virtual hug. It's like I love that because at the end of the day, there is power in that because there's energy that is being transferred. I'm sending you that virtual love. I'm sending you that virtual presence. I'm sending you that virtual comfort. And one of the other items that I always love to use is I've been asked the question. I don't know if you've ever been asked, John, but it's like, what's your favorite emoji? And my favorite emoji is always that happy face with the hand. Like the one that, like that to me is always my favorite one because it gives me, to me, it's like, it feels like, oh, come in, I'm giving you a hug. It's like, that's what, the first time I saw it was like, that's me. And when I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, the Emoji Movie, it's like, I always envision myself as that hugging emoji. So I love that. And of course, that's the message that I'm trying to go ahead and relay.
Well, thank you so much, Guillermo, for your time. I cannot wait for the next episode and for us to learn more about a warm embrace.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate the space that you're allowing me to be able to go ahead and get my message across. And to all you beautiful souls that are listening, please be sure to follow us on social media. We're on all the major social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, and now YouTube. So please, and of course, this podcast is available on all the major podcast platforms. And I very much appreciate your support, and a big hug to each and every one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us by liking and subscribing to our channel. Your small gesture means the world to us and helps us continue creating more content like this. See you in the next video.